Dr. Quinlan Verity was getting pretty tired of being someone's cosmic janitor. The universe had a way of burying its crap under freezing piles of rock, and then giggling as some poor schmuck like him had to dig it up. Today, that giggling took the form of a comet named Vex 11, orbiting in a forgotten corner of nowhere. "Remind me, why are we here again?" asked Ada, his ever-optimistic assistant, while she ineffectually brushed comet dust off her pressure suit. It was like trying to clean your windshield with a toothbrush. Futile and dumb. Because, Ada, the cosmos decided that comet dust is the new gold dust. Or maybe it's because the funding committee hates me, Quinlan replied, his voice crackling through the comms with just the right amount of sarcasm. He poked at the alien artifact, a grotesque monolith that looked like what you might get if Picasso designed a tombstone while drunk on absinthe. Their job: figure out what the hell this thing was and why it was sitting in the middle of a frozen wasteland millions of miles from anything anyone cared about. "This is like the universe's bad joke, isn't it?" Ada said, squinting at the monolith. "Hey, congratulations on your PhD, now go babysit a rock," Quinlan chuckled. "Oh, it's not just any rock, it's an ancient alien rock. Which means it's probably cursed, haunted, or just plain dangerous." Etta rolled her eyes, though the gesture was lost within her helmet. "You really know how to make a girl feel safe." "Safety is overrated," Quinlan replied. He tapped on his datapad, linking their equipment to the monolith. It hummed ominously, reminding him of an old fridge he'd once owned that was more noise than cooling. Just then, a shiver ran through the ground beneath them. "Did you feel that, or is the universe just trying to shake us off for fun?" Before Ada could answer, the monolith's surface shimmered like oil on water. Symbols, unintelligible and yet disturbingly suggestive, started to spread across its surface. Quinlan." "Yes, Ada, I think we woke it up." "You don't say," Quinlan muttered, watching as the icy ground around the monolith began to crack and split, revealing veins of something dark and pulsing beneath. "It looks like we've been promoted from janitors to grave robbers." "Fantastic," Ada said, eyes wide. "I've always wanted to be an archaeologist in a bad sci-fi flick." The air, such as it was on this god-forsaken rock, seemed to thrum with an energy that was both exhilarating and terrifying, a bit like riding a roller coaster without a seatbelt. Quinlan flicked through his datapad, trying to make sense of the readings. "This thing's alive," he declared, as if stating the obvious required scientific validation. "And not particularly friendly," Etta noted as the ground began to shift beneath their feet, rearranging itself like a Rubik's Cube in the hands of a hyperactive child. Quinlan looked at the monolith, then at the expanding cracks in the ground. "Time to go, Etta agreed, already backing towards their ship, the Star Shoveler, an apt name Quinlan had chosen both for its practicality and its subtle middle finger to the academia back on Earth. They made their retreat, clambering over the treacherous terrain with all the grace of a drunk navigating a revolving door. Behind them, the monolith continued its eerie light show, casting long shadows across the comet's surface, turning the desolate snowfield into a landscape out of a fever dream. "I always wanted to trigger an interstellar apocalypse," Quinlan muttered as they finally reached the ship. "Consider your bucket list one step shorter," Etta replied as she slapped the door controls. "And you thought today was gonna be boring." Inside the Star Shoveler, Quinlan sank into the pilot's seat, feeling the familiar creak of outdated upholstery beneath him. Etta slid into the seat beside him, eyes glued to the external cameras. "You're not gonna believe this," she said, her voice a mix of awe and terror. The comet's surface was changing, the once pristine ice now boiling away to reveal an alien landscape beneath. Structures, towers, bridges, and something that looked suspiciously like a vending machine rose from the ground, forming a city that should not have been there. "It's a whole civilization," Etta whispered. "A civilization that's been dead for eons," Quinlan corrected. "And we just hit the restart button. So, what do we do?" Quinlan sighed, leaning back in his chair. First, we don't panic. Not panicking sounds like a good plan. And second, we report this mess back to HQ and pretend we have a clue what's going on. Etta nodded, though her eyes remained on the display, watching the alien city continue to unfold like a blooming, nightmarish flower. And then, Quinlan said, unable to keep the grim humor out of his voice, we hope they don't decide to turn us into their new favorite pets. The comms crackled and a familiar voice came through. Verity, report. Did you find anything interesting on Vex 11, or did you just wake up another cosmic horror? Quinlan glanced at Etta, who shrugged. Oh, you know, the usual. Found an alien city, pissed off some ancient gods. Typical Tuesday. You mean you actually did something useful for once? I'm shocked. Quinlan smirked, adjusting the ship's trajectory. Yeah, I know. Don't worry, we'll be back in time for you to tell us how much we messed up. The voice on the other end sighed with a long-suffering patience that suggested they weren't being paid enough for this. Just get back in one piece, Verity, and try not to blow up anything important on your way back. No promises, Quinlan replied, cutting the comms with a decisive click. As they accelerated away from the comet, the monolith's glow faded into the distance, leaving behind a mystery that was both tantalizing and terrifying. Quinlan couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it all. Well, Etta, I guess today wasn't as pointless as I thought. You know, Etta replied, her voice light despite the chaos they left behind, there are easier ways to get a promotion. True, Quinlan said, grinning despite himself. But where's the fun in that? As they shot through the endless dark, Quinlan couldn't help but feel a thrill of excitement laced with dread. The universe might be a cosmic mess, but at least it was never boring. The Star Shoveler shuddered as it coasted away from Vex 11, leaving the alien city and its glowing monument of cosmic bad decisions far behind. Quinlan Verity leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling like it held the answers to life, the universe, and why the hell he hadn't taken up a safer career, like lion taming. Etta was busy fiddling with the ship's controls, her fingers dancing over the panels with a familiarity that spoke volumes about her tendency to get into and out of messes. So, what's the plan, boss? We report back and pray no one decides we're better off as radioactive dust. Pretty much, Quinlan replied. Toss in a few desperate pleas for increased hazard pay, and you've got my entire strategy. The comms buzzed, adding a layer of urgency to their already frenetic situation. Hey, Verity, you need to see this. It was Jax Virox, the engineer whose idea of a good time involved rewiring things that shouldn't be rewired while laughing maniacally. What's the emergency, Jax? Quinlan asked, trying to sound more in control than he felt. I found something in the data from that monolith, Jax replied. And it's not pretty. Meet us in the lab. The lab was cramped, cluttered, and smelled faintly of burnt coffee and desperation. Tamsin Core, the ship's resident biologist and someone who could make dissecting alien goo sound like a romantic evening, was hunched over a terminal next to Jax. Please tell me you found something that doesn't spell doom for all mankind, Quinlan said as he entered. Tamsin looked up, her eyebrow arching in a way that suggested Quinlan's optimism was as welcome as a fart in a spacesuit. Depends on your definition of doom. We analyzed the composition of the monolith and found traces of what we think is a weapon. A big one. A weapon, Etta said, leaning in with morbid curiosity. Like big enough to blow up a city. Try a planet, Jax interjected, grinning like a kid who just discovered his fireworks stash. This thing could make Earth look like a charred marshmallow. Quinlan let out a low whistle. Great. So we accidentally activated a planet killer. That's just peachy. And there's more, Tamsin continued, swiping her datapad to display swirling streams of data. The energy readings from that city are increasing. It's like the whole place is waking up and it's not in a good mood. Quinlan rubbed the bridge of his nose, feeling a headache coming on. So, we've got a Death Star on steroids and it's pissed off. Jax chuckled darkly. Yep, we're on the edge of a cosmic ass-kicking, and we're the only ones holding the stick. As if the universe was listening in on their misery with a sadistic grin, the lights on the ship flickered, and the usual hum of machinery dipped into an alarming silence. Their comms cut off with a disconcerting finality, like a door slamming shut in a haunted house. Quinlan," Etta said, glancing around as if expecting the walls to start bleeding. "Did we just lose contact with the rest of the galaxy?" "Looks like it," Quinlan sighed, tapping uselessly at his own datapad. "What now, Jax?" "Our tech is having a meltdown, or did you rewire something you shouldn't have?" Jax shrugged, a gesture that could mean anything from "not my fault" to "oops, maybe it was me." Could be interference from the monolith, or maybe it's just the universe screwing with us. "Fantastic," Quinlan muttered. "Stuck on this tin can with a murderous rock and no way to call for help. What could possibly go wrong?" Tamsin, ever the voice of calm reason albeit delivered with the warmth of a glacier, said, "We need to understand what we're dealing with. Samples from the city might help." "Fine," Quinlan conceded, though he felt about as enthusiastic as someone being dragged into a horror movie sequel. "Let's grab what we can and hope it doesn't bite us." They suited up again, the familiar routine of putting on their gear offering a small comfort. Etta, ever the optimist, gave Quinlan a thumbs up. "Cheer up, boss. At least if we die, we'll do it in style." "Yeah, wrapped in aluminum foil and covered in comet dandruff," Quinlan replied dryly. "Real stylish." Back outside, the view was just as surreal as before. The newly exposed alien structures loomed in the distance, casting long shadows that seemed to move on their own like creatures from a child's nightmare. They navigated their way cautiously, each step a gamble on the stability of the shifting ground. The air, what little there was, buzzed with a strange, electric energy that prickled at their skin even through the suits. "Hey, boss," Jax called out, holding up a scanner. "Getting some crazy readings from that tower over there. Might be worth checking out." Quinlan nodded, though he felt like he was leading a parade straight into the jaws of a lion. "Right. Let's see what secrets this place is hiding." The tower was an imposing structure, more like a jagged tooth rising from the gums of an ancient beast. Its surface shimmered with the same oily sheen as the monolith, and Quinlan had to resist the urge to reach out and touch it, as if it might share its secrets through osmosis. Tamsin was the first to approach, her instruments whirring as she scanned the surface. "There's something inside," she murmured, half to herself. "Something." "Biological, biological," Quinlan repeated, immediately regretting every decision that had led him to this point. "Like it's alive." "Not quite," Tamsin replied, her eyes glued to the readout. "More like preserved, like a message in a bottle, only the bottle is a skyscraper." Jax, unable to resist a bit of gallows humor, chimed in. "At least it won't try to eat us." "Yet," Etta added helpfully. They spent the next few hours collecting samples, each discovery deepening the pit in Quinlan's stomach. The city seemed to pulse with a life of its own, each structure a testament to the unfathomable minds that had created it. Minds that apparently had a flair for the dramatic and a penchant for world-ending weaponry. As they worked, Quinlan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every now and then, a flicker of movement at the edge of his vision would make him whip around, only to find nothing but shadows playing tricks on his eyes. "Getting paranoid, Doc," Etta teased, though her own gaze kept darting about like a rabbit in a foxhole. "Just that kind of day," Quinlan replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Let's wrap this up before the decor decides to redecorate us." With their samples secured, they finally made their way back to the Star Shoveler, each step feeling like a small victory against the oppressive weight of the alien city. Back on board, Quinlan slumped into a chair, watching as Tamsin and Jax began analyzing the samples. The tension in the air was palpable, each silence stretching into eternity as they waited for some revelation that might turn the tide in their favor. "So," Etta said, leaning against the wall with the practiced ease of someone who was used to chaos. "What's the plan now? Sit tight and hope someone out there has a better idea." Quinlan rubbed his temples, feeling the beginnings of a stress headache that promised to be legendary. We need to figure out what this weapon is and how to shut it down, preferably without blowing ourselves up in the process. And if we can't, Jax asked, not looking up from his work, then we hope the universe is feeling charitable, Quinlan replied, and that our bosses aren't too attached to the idea of Earth not being a smoking crater. Tamsin, her face lit by the soft glow of her datapad, finally spoke. The samples are reacting to the atmosphere inside the ship. It's like they're waking up. Of course they are, Quinlan muttered, because nothing can ever be easy. Etta gave him a sympathetic pat on the shoulder. Hey, look on the bright side. At least we're not bored. Quinlan chuckled despite the weight of the situation. Yeah, boredom's overrated anyway. As they huddled together in the cramped confines of the Star Shoveler, the vast emptiness of space outside seemed to press in on them, a reminder of how small they were in the grand, uncaring scheme of the universe. And yet, despite the odds stacked against them, Quinlan felt a spark of determination flicker to life. They were just a bunch of cosmic janitors, sure. But if fate insisted on throwing them into the deep end, they'd damn well learn how to swim, or at least doggy paddle their way to survival. Ready for round two? Etta asked, her grin equal parts excitement and insanity. Quinlan nodded, feeling the familiar spark of defiance bubble up. Let's do this. The universe can throw whatever it wants at us. We've got a shovel, and we know how to use it. The lab, a mess of wires and screens that refused to cooperate, hummed with the sort of tension that made you wish for a midlife crisis just for the distraction. Jax was jabbing at his datapad like it had personally insulted him, while Tamsin's fingers danced over her terminal with the kind of grace that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else, like, say, on a beach without impending doom. All right, Jax said with the enthusiasm of a cat in a bathtub. Here's where it gets interesting. Or horrifying, depending on your perspective. Quinlan leaned in, half hoping for a miracle and fully expecting a punchline. Lay it on me. So, the samples we collected, they're not just sitting pretty. They're playing a symphony of subatomic chaos, Jax explained, a twisted grin spreading because, of course, subatomic chaos was his idea of a good time. Meaning? Etta prompted, her eyes darting from screen to screen as if expecting one of them to sprout tentacles. Meaning our ship might become the universe's largest disco ball if we're not careful, Jax replied, tapping a graph that went up in a way graphs rarely do when things are going well. Great. I always wanted to die as a glitter bomb, Quinlan muttered. Tamsin sighed, the kind of sigh that suggested she'd given up explaining basic science to Neanderthals. The samples are reacting to our ship's atmosphere. It's like they're trying to communicate through violent means. Friendly, Quinlan said, rubbing his temples. So what? Do we offer them a peace treaty or a bucket of chicken? Neither, Tamsin replied, deadpan. We need to stabilize the environment they are in. Otherwise, we might be dealing with more than just a headache. Jax snorted. Unless you count spontaneous combustion as a headache. Quinlan was about to suggest they all find new careers, preferably ones involving less cosmic peril, when the ship's alert system blared a noise that could make a banshee cover its ears. Etta's fingers flew across the controls, the flicker of panic in her eyes betraying her usual carefree attitude. Incoming ship, she announced, her voice steady despite the chaos. And it's not one of ours. Fantastic, Quinlan groaned. Because why not add a side of hostile aliens to our menu? The view screen flickered to life, displaying a ship that looked like someone had taken the worst elements of a porcupine and a battle axe and mashed them together. Its silhouette against the blackness of space was enough to make you reconsider your life choices, preferably from behind a nice, solid piece of steel. Zephyri, Tamsin said, her tone as cold as a winter morning, and they're not here for tea and biscuits. Zephyri, Jax echoed, a thrilled edge to his voice that suggested he'd lost more than a few screws. They've got a reputation for being thorough, and by thorough, Quinlan added, you mean they'll kill us and make it look like an accident? Etta shook her head. No time for jokes, boss. They're hailing us. Of course they are, Quinlan muttered, toggling the comms with a sense of impending doom that would make a doomsday prophet envious. The screen flickered, revealing an alien who looked like he just walked out of a nightmare and into a used car dealership. "Humans," the Zephyr said, his voice sliding through the speakers like a snake on silk. "You are trespassing on sacred ground." "Sorry, didn't see the no trespassing signs," Quinlan replied, his sarcasm as sharp as ever. "We'll just be on our way then." The alien's eyes narrowed, his expression one of someone who'd heard every excuse in the universe and found them all lacking. "The artifact you have discovered belongs to the Zephyr. Surrender it, and we might spare your primitive lives." "Generous," Jax muttered under his breath, adjusting the ship's systems with a calm that belied the ticking time bomb metaphorically strapped to their backs. "Unfortunately," Quinlan said, adopting his best diplomatic tone, one that suggested he hadn't slept in days and was fed up with intergalactic nonsense, "the artifact seems a bit attached to us. You know, like a bad rash." The Zephyr's thin lips curled into something that might have been a smile in a parallel universe where smiles involved showing lots of teeth. "Then we shall assist you in removing it, friendly fellows," Etta remarked as the comms cut off. "And here I thought our day couldn't get any better." "Options?" Quinlan asked, though he suspected his options were rapidly dwindling to die painfully and die hilariously. "We could try to outrun them," Etta suggested, a twinkle of mischief in her eyes. "Hope you've been keeping up with your cardio." Or, Jax offered, "we could give them a taste of our own brand of chaos. Let them see how fun subatomic instability can be." Tamsin's gaze was fixed on her datapad, the faint glow illuminating her face. "There might be a way to use the weapon's energy against them." "But it's risky." "And by risky," Quinlan clarified, "you mean suicidal." "Most likely," Tamsin agreed. Quinlan looked around at his crew, the misfit band of cosmic janitors who'd somehow found themselves at the center of a universe hell-bent on their destruction. "Well, let's do it then." "You got it, boss," Ada said, her fingers dancing over the controls like a concert pianist on speed. Preparing to engage in a good old-fashioned game of Let's Not Die Today. Jax was already fiddling with the ship's systems, his expression one of a child about to unleash chaos on an unsuspecting playground. "If this works, I'll buy everyone drinks. If it doesn't, well, I'll see you on the other side." Tamsin nodded, her focus razor-sharp as she began to manipulate the ship systems, coaxing the alien artifact into doing something it probably wasn't designed to do. "Let's hope the Zephyr don't have a taste for irony." The ship lurched, a testament to its age and the questionable legality of its maintenance, as Quinlan guided it away from the looming alien threat. The Zephyr ship followed with the persistence of a tax collector, its weapons systems coming online in a display of fireworks that lacked any of the celebratory spirit. The Star Shoveler shuddered as Etta pushed it to its limits, her grin a manic reflection of the chaos enveloping them. "We've got speed, but they're better armed." "Any luck over there, Tamsin?" "I'm working on it," Tamsin replied, her voice tinged with the kind of concentration that suggested she might be solving a puzzle with a sledgehammer. "The artifact is responding, but I can't guarantee it'll play nice." Quinlan watched the readouts, his faith in their survival hanging by a thread made of wishful thinking and recycled optimism. The Zephyr ship loomed closer, its weapons charging with the kind of finality that spoke of one too many interstellar conflicts. "Jax," Quinlan called over, "any chance you can give them a taste of their own medicine?" Jax's laugh was half mad, half genius. "Oh, I've got something for them. One Zephyr special coming right up." The Star Shoveler jolted as Jax's improvised weaponry came online, its systems singing with the chaotic energy of the alien artifact. The air crackled with electricity, and Quinlan felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand at attention. "Here goes nothing," Etta said, her voice steady as she maneuvered the ship with the kind of grace that only came from flying by the seat of your pants. The Zephyr ship's barrage of fire was met with a wave of energy from the Star Shoveler, a pulsating arc that leapt from their hull like a cosmic whip. The energy crackled and danced, an aurora of deadly intent that splashed against the alien ship's shields. The Zephyr vessel shuddered under the impact, its shields flaring with desperate energy. Quinlan allowed himself a brief moment of hope, a fleeting thing as delicate as the silence that followed an explosion. "We've rattled their cage," Jax reported, his voice a mix of triumph and disbelief. "But they're not out yet." "No one likes a spoiled brat," Quinlan said, even as the Zephyr ship recovered, its weapon systems re-engaging with renewed vigor. Tamsin's voice cut through the tension, sharp as a scalpel. "The artifact's power is fading. We need to break away before we're left holding an empty bag. Which is worse," Etta mused, "being outgunned by aliens or stranded with a dud weapon." "My money's on the aliens," Jax said, recalibrating their systems for one last push. Quinlan nodded, his determination solidifying into a grim resolve. "All right, people. Let's show these Zephyr what happens when you try to steal our toy." The Star Shoveler surged forward, its engines roaring with defiance as Etta executed a maneuver that defied both gravity and common sense. The ship twisted through space, weaving between the Zephyr's attacks like a matador taunting a cosmic bull. The alien artifact flared one last time, its energy coalescing into a brilliant cascade that lashed out at the Zephyr ship. The impact was enough to send the enemy vessel reeling, its systems flickering with the struggle to maintain control. "We did it," Etta cheered, her voice breathless with exhilaration. "Not quite," Quinlan cautioned. "They're still in one piece, and I doubt they're feeling charitable." As if on cue, the Zephyr ship righted itself, its weapons aiming once more with a deadly precision that promised retribution. "Well, they say the third time's the charm," Jax offered, his fingers dancing over the controls in a mad symphony of desperation. "And if it isn't," Tamsin said, her gaze steady as she readied the ship for one final gambit, "we'll make it the charm. Let's finish this." The Star Shoveler surged forward, propelled by a crew fueled by desperation and stubborn defiance. They had come too far, faced too much to let the universe snuff them out without a fight. As they plunged into the Zephyr's path, Quinlan felt the weight of their decisions hanging like a sword above them. But even in the shadow of that blade, he couldn't help but smile. Because sometimes the best you can hope for is to go out with a bang. Or, in their case, a very large, very messy explosion that would make them legends, if only for a moment. And hell, moments were all they had. Quinlan Verity sat in the Star Shoveler's bridge, trying to look more confident than he felt, which wasn't saying much. His ship was a rickety assembly of patched-up metal and misplaced optimism, currently trying to outrun a Zephyr warship with delusions of grandeur. The universe was a big place, but somehow they always managed to find each other. Dr. Quinlan Verity, cosmic janitor and accidental captain, had a problem that wasn't going anywhere. The Zephyr ship loomed like a bad dream that had spilled over into the waking world, and its crew was in no mood to play nice. Their mission was simple: recover an alien artifact that might, or might not, destroy a planet. But nothing was simple, not with an artifact that seemed keener on killing them than cooperating. "Tamsin, talk to me," Quinlan barked, doing his best to sound like someone who wasn't about to panic. Tamsin, the biologist with a gift for understatement, glanced up from her terminal. Her fingers danced across the keys, coaxing out data that seemed to have a personal vendetta against being understood. "The artifact's energy levels are stable, for now, but it's like juggling knives in zero gravity. One slip and we'll be decorating the cosmos with our insides." "Charming visual," Etta said, her attention fixed on the controls. "Let's try not to reach that point, shall we?" Quinlan nodded, more for himself than anyone else. "Right. Jax, how's our little science project?" Jax Virox, who had never met a piece of tech he couldn't poke at until it broke or worked better, was knee-deep in wires and circuits. "I've rerouted the energy flow, but it's like trying to funnel a hurricane through a straw." "So, business as usual then," Quinlan muttered, resisting the urge to bang his head against something solid. Pretty much, Jax replied with a grin that suggested he might actually enjoy this chaos. The Zephyri weren't going to wait around while Quinlan and his crew hashed out their existential crises. They had demands, and they were backed by enough firepower to reduce the star shoveler to cosmic confetti. The comms crackled to life, and Quinlan's stomach plummeted as the Zephyri leader's face filled the screen. "Humans," the alien's voice oozed with contempt, "your defiance is noted. Surrender the artifact or we will take it by force." Quinlan leaned into the camera, trying his best to muster a look of negotiation rather than defeat. "We'd love to comply, but there's a slight problem. You see, the artifact doesn't want to be surrendered. It's got attachment issues." The Zephyri's eyes narrowed, his patience already thinner than Quinlan's confidence. "You leave us no choice." Quinlan cut the comms before the alien could elaborate on those choices, none of which he was likely to enjoy. "Okay, folks, Plan B." "And what exactly is Plan B?" Ada asked, her tone suggesting she already knew the answer and didn't like it. "We improvise," Quinlan replied, standing up and gesturing towards the lab where the artifact remained both a mystery and a menace. The lab was a mess of wires and screens, a physical manifestation of everything that could go wrong in the universe. Dr. Quinlan Verity, cosmic janitor, was in his element, if not exactly comfortable. "The comet's minerals," Quinlan started, trying to sound like he had any idea what he was doing. "Could they act as a shield? Block the artifact's energy? Maybe even use it against the Zephyri?" Jack snapped his fingers, his eyes lighting up with the kind of mad genius that suggested he'd already considered 10 ways this could fail. "It might work, but it needs to be precise. One wrong calculation and we could end up like Wednesday's leftovers." "Worth a shot," Quinlan said, more to himself than anyone else. "We just need to avoid total annihilation," Tamsin interjected, arching an eyebrow. "Exactly," Quinlan agreed, looking around at his crew, the misfits who had somehow become his family in this vast, uncaring universe. "Let's get to it." The plan was as risky as it was desperate, but desperation was all they had. With the Zephyri on their tails, they needed a miracle, or a catastrophic failure that looked enough like a miracle to convince their alien adversaries to back off. Jack set to work, his fingers a blur as he reconfigured the ship's systems to interface with the comet's minerals. The Star Shoveler had seen its share of modifications, most of them questionable at best, but even this was pushing the limits of what it could handle. "Got it," Jax announced, wiping sweat from his brow. "I've rerouted the energy. The containment field should hold, theoretically." "Theoretically," Quinlan echoed, not entirely comforted by the word. Etta glanced over her shoulder, her expression caught between skepticism and the kind of reckless optimism that had landed them in this mess. "I've always liked theories. They're like plans, but without the pesky need to succeed." Quinlan grinned despite himself. "Exactly. Let's see if we can't make this one work." As the crew busied themselves with their respective tasks, the ship's atmosphere grew as tense as a poker game with life-or-death stakes. Outside, the Zephyri ship loomed, its weapons bristling with the threat of imminent destruction. "Ready when you are," Jax called out, his voice a mix of excitement and dread. "Let's do this," Quinlan replied, taking a deep breath and hoping it wouldn't be his last. The Star Shoveler hummed with power as Jax's modifications kicked in. The screens flickered, displaying streams of data that indicated the comet's minerals were interacting with the artifact's energy. The ship shuddered as the containment field activated, a shimmering barrier that enveloped them in a protective cocoon. For a moment, it seemed as though they might actually pull this off. The Zephyri ship hesitated, its weapon systems temporarily thrown off by the sudden surge of energy emanating from the Star Shoveler. "Looks like we've bought ourselves some time," Ada observed, though her fingers remained poised over the controls, ready to react at a moment's notice. But Quinlan knew better than to celebrate prematurely. Experience had taught him that the universe had a particularly twisted sense of humor, and it wasn't done with them yet. A crackling sound filled the air, and the screens flared with a blinding light. Alarms blared, a chorus of impending doom that suggested their plan had backfired in spectacular fashion. "What's happening?" Tamsin shouted, her voice barely audible over the cacophony. "The field's collapsing," Jax yelled, his hands flying over the controls in a desperate attempt to stabilize the situation. Quinlan felt a wave of panic, his earlier confidence evaporating like moisture in a solar flare. "Options. Working on it," Jack snapped, his focus entirely on the screens that seemed more intent on displaying their impending demise than offering solutions. The Star Shoveler bucked like a wild animal, and Quinlan braced himself against the console, the ship's violent shudders a reminder of just how fragile their existence was. "Well, this is awkward," Etta quipped, her tone as dry as the air in the malfunctioning life support system. Quinlan couldn't help but laugh, the sound coming out more like a strangled choke. "I always knew we'd go out in style." The containment field flickered, the energy surging unpredictably as the minerals failed to hold the artifact's power in check. The Zephyr ship, sensing their moment of weakness, moved in for the kill. "We're sitting ducks here," Jax warned, his voice tinged with frustration and fear. "Quinlan, if you've got any more brilliant ideas, now's the time," Tamsin said, her eyes scanning the data for any glimmer of hope. Quinlan racked his brain, searching for inspiration, or at least a way to go out with a bang that wouldn't involve literal disintegration. A thought struck him, one that was as reckless as it was genius. "Jax, can we reverse the polarity?" Jax blinked, momentarily stunned by the suggestion. "Reverse the polarity? Are you serious?" "Deadly serious," Quinlan replied, his determination a sharp contrast to the chaos surrounding them. "If we can channel the artifact's energy back into the comet, it might destabilize the Zephyr shields." "Give them a taste of their own medicine." Jax's eyes widened, and a slow grin spread across his face. "It's insane. I love it." "Then let's make it happen," Quinlan said, his resolve solidifying into a last-ditch effort that would either save them or seal their fate. The crew sprang into action, each member contributing their skills to the mad plan that was their only hope. The Star Shoveler's systems groaned under the strain, the ship itself appearing to hold its breath as Jax implemented the adjustments. "Here goes nothing," Jax murmured, fingers crossed metaphorically and literally as he hit the final sequence. The ship lurched violently, the energy reversing in a spectacular arc that leapt from the comet back towards the Zephyr vessel. The space between them crackled with raw power, a deadly dance that left both ships teetering on the edge of oblivion. For a heart-stopping moment, there was silence, a deep, profound quiet that felt like the calm before a storm. And then the Zephyr shields buckled, their ship rocked by the backlash of energy they hadn't expected. "We did it," Etta cheered, her voice a beacon of hope in the midst of destruction. Quinlan felt a rush of relief, tempered by the knowledge that they weren't out of danger yet. The Zephyr ship was damaged but not defeated, and they would regroup quickly. "Time to get out of here," Quinlan ordered, his tone brooking no argument. "We've overstayed our welcome." Etta didn't need to be told twice. She pushed the Star Shoveler to its limits, the engines roaring to life as they made a hasty retreat from the scene of their unlikely victory. Behind them, the Zephyr ship struggled to recover, its systems flickering in the wake of the unexpected assault. But Quinlan couldn't afford to dwell on their enemies or the artifact they'd left behind. Survival was his priority, and he'd be damned if they didn't make it out in one piece. "Next time, let's try a less suicidal plan," Tamsin suggested, though her smile belied the tension of the moment. Quinlan chuckled, the sound a release of pent-up anxiety. "Agreed, but hey, look on the bright side, we're still alive. More or less." "More or less," Jax echoed, his grin as infectious as ever. As the Star Shoveler broke free from the Zephyr blockade, leaving chaos and confusion in its wake, Quinlan allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The universe was a harsh place, but somehow they'd managed to cheat death once again. And who knew? Maybe their luck would hold, at least until the next disaster came knocking at their door. In the meantime, Quinlan Verity, cosmic janitor and reluctant hero, would keep doing what he did best, surviving against all odds with a healthy dose of sarcasm and a willingness to laugh in the face of danger. Because in a universe full of uncertainties, that was one thing he could count on. Quinlan Verity sat at the helm of the Star Shoveler, staring into the endless maw of space with the expression of a man who had just realized his life was a cosmic joke. If there was an award for the universe's biggest sucker, he was sure his picture would be right next to it, giving a thumbs up. The ship's atmosphere was as oppressive as a funeral, which seemed fitting since survival felt more like a dream than reality. Supplies were dwindling faster than a politician's promises, and the crew's nerves were as frayed as cheap wiring. "Quinlan," Tamsin called from her corner of the bridge, where she was fiddling with the terminal. Her voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, like she was trying to convince herself more than anyone else. "The samples are getting worse. If we don't stabilize them soon, we're going to have bigger problems than just the Zephyri." "Great," Quinlan said dryly. "Just when I thought today couldn't get any better." Jax Virox, perched over the mess of cables and contraptions he called his workstation, looked up. His normally chaotic energy seemed dimmed, restrained by fatigue and frustration. "I'll fix it," he muttered, though his tone lacked its usual manic confidence, a sure sign that the situation was dire. "Fix it," Etta chimed in, her voice laced with sarcasm thicker than the ship's hull. "Like you fixed the containment field." Jax shot her a glare capable of melting tungsten. "Hey, that was a collaborative disaster. We all pitched in." "We're all going to catch something too if we don't get this sorted," Tamsin interjected, her eyes not leaving the data stream that painted a bleak picture of their current predicament. "These symptoms are getting worse. I don't know how much longer we can keep this up," Quinlan sighed, rubbing his eyes. "So, anybody got a plan that doesn't involve us dying horribly?" Jax raised his hand like a kid in class, though he was the kind who'd suggest setting the school on fire just to test the sprinkler system. "What if we reprogram the artifact's biological matrix?" "Reprogram it?" Etta asked, skepticism practically dripping from her words. "And how exactly do you propose we do that without blowing ourselves into space dust?" Jax grinned, the kind of grin that said he had absolutely no idea but was eager to find out. "We use the ship's AI. We've got a databank full of comet mineral properties. I say we rewrite the artifact's behavior." There was a pause, the kind of silence that only accompanied ideas that teetered on the brink of brilliance and insanity. "Let me get this straight," Quinlan said slowly. "You want to mess with an ancient alien artifact's programming. You know, the kind that's probably got more booby traps than a paranoid doomsday prepper." "Pretty much," Jax replied, unfazed. "Look, it's that or wait for the Zephyri to come back and finish what they started. Or wait for whatever's in those samples to turn us into cosmic goo," Tamsin added helpfully. "Can't wait for that," Quinlan said. "I've heard cosmic goo is a real career killer." Etta rolled her eyes, though there was a hint of reluctant agreement in her voice. "It's a crazy plan, but we're fresh out of sane ones." "Crazy it is, then," Quinlan decided, feeling the weight of desperation settle around his shoulders like a leaden cloak. "Let's get to it." The crew dispersed to their stations, each of them clutching to the thin thread of hope that this insane idea would be their salvation. The hum of the ship's systems was a constant reminder that every second counted, and the oppressive atmosphere felt like it was closing in on them. Jax set to work, his fingers flying over the interface with the kind of reckless abandon that made Quinlan both admire and fear him. The ship's AI came to life, a disembodied voice that was both comforting and unnerving. "How may I assist you today? We're trying to reprogram an alien artifact to not kill us," Jax explained casually, as if he were ordering a coffee. The AI paused, its synthetic brain likely running through all sorts of protocols and warnings. "Reprogramming an alien artifact carries a 92% probability of catastrophic failure." Sounds about right, Jax murmured, unfazed by the odds. Let's try it anyway. Etta cast Quinlan a look that clearly said she thought they were all mad. Quinlan gave her a grin that was equal parts apology and bravado. If we're going down, might as well go down swinging, right? You always were an optimist, she said, returning to her controls with a resigned shrug. Tamsin came over, her expression serious. We need a backup plan. If this goes south, we've got to have an alternative. An alternative, Quinlan echoed. Like what? Beg the Zephyri for a quick death, or eject the artifact and hope they take it as a peace offering, Jack suggested, only half joking. Quinlan shook his head. If this doesn't work, we're out of options, so let's make sure it does. Ior's passed with the kind of agonizing slowness that tests one's sanity. The Star Shoveler's interior felt smaller with each tick of the clock. The crew's patience stretched thinner than the air in an open airlock. Tension simmered just beneath the surface, threatening to boil over at any moment. Jax, Tamsin said, watching as he continued to tinker with the artifact's data. What if we're making it worse? What if we're poking at something that's better left alone? Jax didn't look up, his focus unyielding. Better left alone. Everything in this universe is better left alone, but here we are. You know, Etta said, leaning back in her chair with a forced casualness. If this works, I'm going to need a drink that's stronger than the ship's reactor. Quinlan laughed, a brief, brittle sound. Put me down for 2. Hell, make it 3. As the minutes dragged on, the crew's nerves frayed further, the weight of their decision pressing down like a gravity increase. Yet beneath the anxiety there was a gritty determination, a shared resolve that came from having faced the abyss together and spat in its eye. Then, without warning, the AI spoke, its voice calm amidst the chaos. Reprogramming complete. Artifact behavior parameters altered. Jax exhaled a breath he'd been holding for far too long. Did it work? The screens blinked to life, showing a complex array of data that was as reassuring as a loaded weapon pointed at their heads. But the artifact had stabilized, its energy output normalized to a level that didn't scream imminent disaster. Holy hell, Quinlan breathed, unable to keep the awe out of his voice. We did it. Etta let out a laugh, the sound rich with relief and disbelief. I can't believe it, we actually did it. Tamsin shook her head, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Against all odds, we pulled it off. Jax grinned like a kid on his birthday. I knew we could. But we're not home free yet, Quinlan reminded them, though his heart was lighter than it had been in days. We still need to get out of Zephyri space before they come back for round 2. Right, Etta said, snapping back to her station with newfound energy, punching in a course now. Let's get the hell out of here. The Star Shoveler leapt forward, its engines roaring to life with a power that matched the crew's renewed determination. They were still alive, still fighting, and that was victory enough. As the stars streaked past the viewport, Quinlan allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. They had faced down the odds, thrown everything they had into one last desperate gamble, and come out the other side in one piece. For now, that was enough. Worst case, we can sell this story to the next bunch of idiot adventurers, Jax said with a smirk. Make a fortune in cautionary tales. Quinlan chuckled, the sound rich with the kind of weary joy that only came from surviving the impossible. If we make it back, drinks are on me. In that case, Etta said, her eyes on the stars, I'll be ordering the whole damn bar. In the vast, uncaring universe, Quinlan and his crew had found a way to stick together, to defy the odds with humor, grit, and a touch of insanity. Whatever the future held, they'd face it head-on, armed with nothing but their wits and a healthy dose of gallows humor. Because in the end, they weren't just surviving. They were living. And that, Quinlan mused with a wry grin, was the real trick to winning in this god-forsaken galaxy. The air on the Star Shoveler was tense enough to slice with a dull butter knife, and Quinlan Verity was getting real tired of hyperventilating every time something beeped. The universe had a funny way of dishing out cosmic jokes, and today it felt like they were the punchline. Quinlan, Jax's voice crackled through the intercom. sounding like a mix between a malfunctioning droid and a caffeinated squirt. "You might want to see this." Quinlan sighed, muttering something unprintable about cosmic janitors and their awful luck. He made his way toward Jax's cluttered workstation, dodging wires and obsolete tech that probably hadn't been used since the last century. "What fresh hell is it now, Jax?" Quinlan asked, bracing himself for whatever calamity had found them this time. "Zephyr warship on our 6, Jax replied, like he was announcing that it was Taco Tuesday instead of imminent doom. "And they look pissed." "Pissed?" "That's the understatement of the century," Etta interjected, her sarcasm coming through loud and clear. She was scanning the ship's sensors with the focus of someone who'd seen one too many close calls. "Their guns are charged, and they're moving faster than a teenager with a fresh license. I take it they didn't like our little artifact hack job," Quinlan said, rubbing his temples like he could massage away the stress. "Looks like they're here to collect overdue library fees," Jax said with a grim chuckle. "And they brought the whole damn squad." "Perfect. Just what we needed," Quinlan muttered, trying to figure out how to dodge a Zephyr warship with a ship named after a sanitation worker. Tamsin appeared in the doorway, her lab coat flapping like a cape as she hurried over. "Quinlan, we might have a bigger problem." "There's a bigger problem than an angry Zephyr warship?" Quinlan asked, the disbelief clear in his voice. "Yeah," Tamsin said, her expression grave. "The samples, they're interacting with something on the comet. If we don't do something, we could be looking at a chain reaction that blows the whole thing sky high." "Well, isn't that just fantastic?" Quinlan said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "First, we're going to be turned into space debris by the Zephyr, and now we're sitting on a cosmic bomb." "That's not all," Tamsin continued, a flicker of something that might have been hope crossing her face. "I found something in the alien biology, something that matches our DNA." Quinlan blinked, trying to process. "Wait, you're saying we're somehow related to these ancient dust mites?" "Not exactly," Tamsin replied, shaking her head. "But there's a link, a shared genetic marker. It means we might be able to interact with the artifact in a way the Zephyr can't." "So, what you're saying is, we might have a secret handshake with this thing," Jax said, a grin spreading across his face. "That's some next-level Deus Ex Machina right there." "It's a long shot," Tamsin admitted. "But it's the only shot we've got." Quinlan ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down harder than a black hole's gravity. "All right, let's assume we can communicate with this thing. How are we supposed to do that before the Zephyr turn us into stardust?" "The AI," Jax said, snapping his fingers. "We feed it the genetic data, see if it can establish a connection." "That's assuming the AI doesn't have a meltdown trying to translate genetic code into alien tech speak," Etta pointed out. "This isn't exactly in its job description." Quinlan shrugged, resigned to their fate. "If we're going to die, might as well do it with a bang. Jax, get on it." "Tamsin, keep those samples stable as long as you can." "And what about the Zephyr?" Etta asked, her hands poised over the controls. "Stall them," Quinlan said with a grim smile. "Tell them we're having technical difficulties. You know, the usual." Etta nodded, her fingers dancing over the console. "I'll see if I can buy us some time." "No promises, though. We'll take what we can get," Quinlan replied, his mind racing with plans, none of which seemed particularly sane. Jax was already at his workstation, fingers flying over the interface like a maestro playing a symphony of chaos. "AI, we need you to interpret some genetic data. Can you do that?" The AI voice crackled through the speakers, sounding mildly offended. "I am capable of many processes, including genetic analysis. However, this task carries a significant probability of error." "Join the club," Jax muttered. "Upload the data, let's see what happens." As the AI worked, the tension on the bridge grew thicker, like the ship itself was holding its breath. Quinlan could feel the eyes of his crew on him, each of them waiting for a miracle to unfold amidst the chaos. "AI, any progress?" Quinlan asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Analyzing," the AI replied, its tone as calm as ever. "Genetic markers confirmed. Establishing connection." For a moment, the screens went dark and Quinlan's heart skipped a beat. Then lines of alien text began to scroll across the display, accompanied by a low hum that reverberated through the ship. "I think it's working," Tamsin whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Let's hope it doesn't change its mind and decide to disintegrate us," Etta said, ever the optimist. Quinlan watched the alien symbols, feeling a strange sense of connection, like he was brushing against a part of the universe that had been hidden just out of reach. "All right, let's see if we can talk to it." The AI translated, its voice now tinged with something almost like curiosity. "Artifact ready for command input." Jax let out a whoop, raising both fists in triumph. "We did it! We're in!" "Great," Quinlan said, feeling the adrenaline surge through his veins. "Now let's see if we can use this thing to get rid of our Zephyr friends." "On it," Jax said, already typing commands with fervor. The screens flickered, and the ship shuddered as the artifact's energy began to pulse through the Star Shoveler's systems. For a brief, glorious moment, Quinlan felt a surge of hope, like they were finally turning the tide. But because the universe just couldn't let them have a win without a twist, the Zephyr warship chose that exact moment to open fire. The impact rattled the ship, sending alarms blaring and lights flickering. Quinlan grabbed onto the nearest console to keep from being thrown off balance. "Status report." Etta grimaced, fingers flying over the controls. "Shields holding, but not for long. They're hitting us with everything they've got. We need to get that artifact to defend us now," Quinlan shouted over the din. "I'm trying," Jax yelled, his frustration palpable. "The interface is slower than a sloth in a tar pit." "Quinlan," Tamsin called urgently, her voice rising above the chaos. "The samples, they're stabilizing." "That's something at least," Quinlan grunted, focusing on the silver lining in the storm. The Zephyr continued their assault, relentless as ever. The ship groaned under the strain, and Quinlan could feel the tension ratcheting up with every hit. "AI, divert all power to the artifact," Jax barked. "Get us some protection now." "Processing command," the AI replied, its tone maddeningly calm. The lights dimmed as power surged through the artifact, and Quinlan held his breath, praying for a miracle. The ship shuddered, and then, suddenly, the Zephyr's weapons fire ceased. Etta let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Did we just do that?" Jack stared at the screens, a grin spreading across his face. "I think we just put up a shield." Quinlan allowed himself a smile, the kind that spoke of relief and disbelief in equal measure. "Not bad for a bunch of cosmic janitors, huh?" The Zephyr seemed momentarily stunned, their warship hovering just beyond the shimmering barrier the artifact had erected. But Quinlan knew it was only a matter of time before they regrouped. "We can't stay here," Quinlan said, his mind already racing with possibilities. "We need to use this break to our advantage." "Suggestions?" Etta asked, her eyes locked on the enemy ship. "Let's see if we can use the artifact to propel us out of this sector," Jax said, his fingers dancing over the controls. "Get us out of their range." "Do it," Quinlan ordered, feeling the adrenaline spike once more. The minutes ticked by like hours as the AI processed the new commands, the artifact humming with power that was both exhilarating and terrifying. "Propulsion ready," the AI announced, a hint of triumph in its voice. "Punch it," Quinlan ordered, holding onto his seat as the ship lurched forward, engines roaring with newfound vigor. The Star Shoveler shot forward, the stars blurring past them as they left the Zephyr far behind. Quinlan felt a surge of relief, tempered by the knowledge that their reprieve was likely temporary. "Well," Etta said, exhaling slowly, "that was a close shave." Quinlan nodded, his gaze fixed on the stars. "We're not out of the woods yet, but at least we live to fight another day. And we have a secret weapon," Tamsin said, her voice tinged with excitement. "Something the Zephyr can't touch." Jax leaned back, a satisfied grin on his face. Who knew ancient alien tech could be so helpful? "Just another day on the Star Shoveler," Quinlan said, his voice carrying a mixture of relief and the ever-present edge of cynicism. "Let's head for safer space." As the ship sped through the void, Quinlan couldn't help but feel a thrill of victory, however fleeting. They'd faced down impossible odds and come out the other side, battered but unbroken. In the cold, vast expanse of space, they'd found something worth fighting for each other. And maybe, just maybe, a little hope amidst the chaos. "Next stop," Quinlan said with a grin. "The nearest bar." "Make mine a double," Etta replied, her voice filled with a warmth that belied the darkness they'd just escaped. And as the star shoveler hurtled toward its uncertain future, Quinlan couldn't help but feel that, for once, they might just have the upper hand in this unforgiving galaxy. Quinlan stood in the star shoveler's cramped control room, surrounded by more blinking lights than a Christmas tree on a caffeine high. There was a sense of weary triumph in the air, like they'd just survived a particularly violent family dinner. The Zephyri threat had retreated, but the real win was still on the horizon, like a mirage in a desert where miracles sporadically happened, usually to other people. "All right, genius," Quinlan said, turning to Tamsin, who was neck-deep in alien biology like it was some sort of cosmic Sudoku. "You've got a shared genetic marker with this artifact, which is either a fortuitous coincidence or a sign to quit while we're ahead. What's our next move?" Tamsin adjusted her glasses, which were perpetually sliding down her nose like they were tired of being there. "We reprogram the artifact, turn its potential for mass destruction into something a little less genocidal, a medicine maybe. Something that'll make the Zephyri back off and keep us from getting turned into cosmic charcoal." Jax, who had been poking at his datapad like it owed him money, snorted. "A feel-good alien weapon. That's rich. But I've seen crazier ideas work, usually in bad holovids." Quinlan leaned against the console, crossing his arms. "Sounds like you've got a plan, Tamsin. How do we start?" "First," Tamsin said, sparing a glance at the terminal, which was filled with more alien script than an intergalactic Rosetta Stone, "we need to convince this artifact that it wants to heal rather than annihilate. Bit of an attitude adjustment, interstellar style." "Good luck with that," Etta called from the helm, deadpan as ever. "Last time I tried adjusting anyone's attitude, I ended up with a black eye and a restraining order." "All right, people," Quinlan interrupted. "Let's focus. Tamsin, can you get the artifact to play nice?" "Not without a little help," Tamsin admitted, her voice a mixture of determination and thinly veiled exasperation. "I need you to reroute some power from non-essential systems. Jax, I'll need you to interface the genetic data into the artifact systems, which is going to require some real creative thinking." "Creative thinking is my middle name," Jax grinned, cracking his knuckles. "Right after disaster," Quinlan, turning to Etta, asked, "And you? Can you keep us steady?" "Steady as a drunk at closing time," she replied, her fingers already dancing over the controls to keep them from drifting into a nearby asteroid belt. Quinlan felt a surge of warmth for his crew. They were like him, patched up, cynical, and utterly incapable of quitting, even when reason and sanity suggested it. As Tamsin and Jax worked, the ship felt like it was holding its breath, a sensation not unlike realizing you're the only person in the room who doesn't know the punchline. The artifact hummed with an unsettling energy, like it was trying to decide whether to become a savior or a serial killer. "So," Quinlan said, breaking the silence hanging over the bridge like a funeral shroud, "what's the chance we all get vaporized?" "On a scale of 1 to 10, Jax muttered, eyes glued to his workstation. "A solid 12, but hey, who wants to live forever, right?" "Actually, I'd settle for living till next week," Quinlan replied, though even his own words held a note of doubt. He turned to Tamsin, who was furiously typing commands into the terminal. "Any luck? The artifact is receptive," she said, the uncertainty in her voice as subtle as a sledgehammer. "I've managed to access its core functions. Now I just need to reverse engineer the weapon into something less aggressive. Friendly fire could take on a whole new meaning," Etta quipped. "So, what are we aiming for? Universal skirmish cream?" "Transgalactic aspirin. Something like that," Tamsin replied, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips despite the tension. I've isolated the genetic marker that links us to the artifact. If I can manipulate the artifact's programming, it might release a wave of nanites that communicates with the Zephyri's biology, neutralizing their aggression. Wouldn't that be the ultimate peacekeeper? Quinlan mused. Making the bad guys take a nap instead of blowing them to bits. Or it could just make them really, really sleepy, Jack suggested. And that's a start. The seconds ticked by with the speed of a glacier on sedatives. Quinlan watched as Jax and Tamsin worked, feeling the oppressive weight of the universe's judgment bearing down on them, like a disapproving parent on report card day. "Okay," Tamsin announced finally, her voice tinged with the giddy relief of someone who just defused a bomb by accident. "I think I've got it." "You think?" Quinlan raised an eyebrow, the expression half skepticism and half admiration. "The interface is ready," Jax said, flashing a triumphant grin that was almost genuine. "Let's hope the universe isn't in the mood for cruel comedy today." Quinlan nodded. "Do it." The artifact pulsed ominously, sending a shiver through the ship that Quinlan felt down to his boots. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. And then the screens lit up with cascading lines of text, the alien symbols transforming into something almost readable. "Processing," the AI chimed in, its voice maddeningly calm. "Nanite program initiated." "Here goes nothing," Etta murmured, her eyes glued to the sensors as if willing them to show something, anything, that didn't result in their untimely demise. The alien artifact began to vibrate, its energy expanding outward like a ripple in a pond, except this ripple was made of microscopic machines designed to tweak biology into submission. "I'm seeing changes," Tamsin said, staring at the readouts with wide-eyed amazement. "The Zephyri, they're withdrawing." "You did it," Quinlan breathed, a mixture of disbelief and awe coloring his words. "You actually did it." The tension that had been building like a bad smell in the room dissipated, replaced by a heady sense of triumph. The Zephyri warship, which had been looming like a bad hangover, was retreating, its aggressive maneuvers replaced with the cosmic equivalent of stumbling away to sleep it off. "Looks like we're not on the menu anymore," Jack said, unable to keep the grin off his face. "Serves them right," Etta interjected, her hands finally stilling over the console. "Thinking they could bully us around just because they've got fancy ships." Quinlan allowed himself a small, crooked smile, the kind that hinted at relief but was mostly relief's sarcastic cousin. "Just wait until they see us again. Maybe they'll bring us a gift basket next time." Tamsin chuckled, her tension easing as she leaned back in her chair. "We might just get out of this with a new reputation. Humanity, the species that can turn a doomsday device into a get-well-soon card. That's one for the history books," Jack said, stretching like a cat that had just claimed victory over a particularly tricky sunbeam. Etta snorted. "And to think I was worried we'd end up as footnotes." Quinlan looked around at his crew, these people who had somehow become his family amidst the chaos of the cosmos. "All right, folks. Let's find somewhere safe to resupply and figure out our next move. And maybe take a break from saving the universe," Etta suggested. "At least long enough to have a drink or two." "Amen to that," Quinlan agreed. "Plot us a course, Etta, preferably somewhere with a decent bar." The Star Shoveler hummed to life, the engines purring like a contented beast as it charted a path across the stars. They had faced down impossible odds, turned an alien weapon into a means of peace and lived to tell the tale. Not bad for a crew that was, at best, a collection of cosmic janitors and misfits. "Cheers to us," Jack said, raising an imaginary glass. "For once we didn't screw it all up." Quinlan nodded, feeling a rare and welcome sense of optimism. "Let's hope the universe doesn't get wise to us." As they sped through the void, the stars stretching endlessly before them, Quinlan allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. They'd beaten the odds, but more importantly, they'd done it together. "Onward," he said, his voice filled with a newfound determination. "To whatever madness comes next." With that, the Star Shoveler plunged into the depths of space, its crew ready to face whatever the universe dared to throw at them next. And as Quinlan settled into his seat, he couldn't help but think that, for the first time in a long while, they might just have the upper hand in this cosmic game of cat and mouse. The Star Shoveler hummed its familiar tune, a symphony of loose bolts, ancient wiring, and an engine barely holding together by sheer stubbornness. As the HFY warship retreated, Quinlan leaned back in his chair, his mind racing with thoughts of what they'd just accomplished and what it all meant for humanity's place in the universe. It was one hell of a thing, turning a weapon of mass destruction into a cosmic chill pill. Humanity 1, Universe 0, for now. Jax was laughing softly to himself, still perched over his workstation, which looked more like a nest of chaotic cables than an actual workstation. I can't believe we pulled that off. Honestly thought we'd be space dust by now. Yeah, well, don't go planning our victory parade just yet, Quinlan replied. We might have turned the HFY into the universe's sleepiest warlords, but there's always another batch of cosmic jerks waiting around the corner. Ada piped up from the helm, her voice laced with that signature deadpan humor. I can't wait to meet them. Maybe they'll bring cupcakes. Quinlan chuckled, though the weight of everything they'd been through still pressed on him like a leaden blanket. At least we're not dead. That's got to count for something, right? Tamsin, ever the pragmatist, adjusted her glasses and peered at the terminal, which was thankfully displaying something other than imminent doom. We've changed the rules of the game, Quinlan. Other species will have to rethink attacking us if they know we've got the power to neutralize aggression with a flick of a switch. Or a stroke of genius in this case, Jax added, shooting a glance at Tamsin. You've outdone yourself, Tamsin shrugged, though there was a ghost of a smile on her lips. It's not every day you get to say you stopped a war with a reprogrammed alien artifact. I'm thinking of adding it to my resume. Interstellar diplomat, Ed mused. You'll be drowning in job offers. Or assassination attempts, Jax muttered. Depends on how the HFY take their defeat. Quinlan rubbed the back of his neck, trying to ease the tension that had settled there like an unwanted guest. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We've still got to get back to civilization without running out of food or air. Ah, the simple pleasures of space travel, Ed quipped. Starvation and asphyxiation, the delightful twins of the cosmos. With the immediate threat put to bed, literally, in the case of the HFY, the crew shifted into a more relaxed routine. The Star Shoveler was on a course toward a nearby space station, a cesspool of intergalactic commerce and questionable hygiene, but an essential pit stop for supplies and repairs. As they floated through the void, Tamsin took a moment to reflect. You know, she said, there's a chance we just opened up a whole new chapter in interstellar diplomacy. Maybe now other species will see us as more than just the scrappy underdogs, or as those lunatics who hacked a doomsday device, Jax countered. Either way, we've definitely made an impression, Quinlan nodded. Let's hope it's a good one. I prefer our next encounter with alien life to involve less shooting and more talking. Talking, Etta said, the most dangerous weapon of all. The ship continued its journey, the hum of the engines a soothing backdrop to their conversations about what lay ahead. Quinlan took a moment to observe his crew, each one a testament to the resilience of humanity, despite their flaws and quirks. Whatever happens next, Quinlan said, I'm glad it's going to happen with you lot. We make one hell of a team. Agreed, Tamsin said, her voice warm with camaraderie. Here's to surviving the unimaginable, and to inventing the improbable, Jax added. We turned a killing machine into a peacekeeper. Who else can say that? Well, Etta interjected, if anyone else does say it, we'll know they're lying. Quinlan felt a surge of pride, a rare and fleeting emotion in his line of work. He leaned back, gazing out at the stars that stretched before them, endless and full of mystery. Here's to whatever madness comes next. Their journey to the nearest station was mercifully uneventful, though the Star Shoveler's rattling interior had a way of making even the calmest voyages feel like a white-knuckle ride. They docked at the station, a sprawling mass of metal and neon clinging to an asteroid like a parasite that refused to be evicted. The crew disembarked, the change in gravity a welcome relief from the ship's ever so slightly off artificial gravity that always made Quinlan feel a bit like a drunken sailor. "Ah, the sweet scent of stale air and commercial desperation," Jax remarked, taking a deep breath. "Nothing like it. Try not to get mugged," Etta advised, her eyes scanning the bustling crowd. "I hear the locals don't take IOU." Quinlan led the way, making a beeline for the supply depot. "Let's stock up and get out of here before someone decides they want to test our artifact hacking skills firsthand." Tamsin, meanwhile, was already making her way to the station's data hub, her fingers itching to upload the modified artifacts data to the interstellar network. "If we share what we've learned," she said, "maybe other species will think twice about using ancient weapons as toys. Or at least they'll hire us as consultants," Jax joked. "I could use a cushy desk job," Quinlan snorted. "Yeah, because you're really the corporate type." As Tamsin uploaded the data, a small crowd gathered around, curious to see what the humans had been up to. Quinlan noticed the mix of awe and skepticism in their eyes, a reflection of the universe at large. "Guess we're celebrities now," he said, watching them with wary amusement. Etta, standing beside him, shrugged. "People love a good underdog story, especially when the underdog wins." "Here's hoping they don't expect an encore," Quinlan said. "I'd rather not have to top this little escapade." With supplies replenished and data shared, the crew regrouped at a small, dimly lit tavern on the station, a place that served drinks strong enough to make even the most hardened spacefarer think twice. "To surviving the impossible," Quinlan toasted, raising his glass. "And to making it look easy," Jax added, clinking glasses with the others. Tamsin took a sip, savoring the burn. "Let's not forget the part where we didn't die," Etta smirked. "Yeah, that's always a bonus." They laughed, the sound startling in its genuine warmth. For a moment, the universe's vast indifference seemed a little less daunting. But as they settled into their seats, Quinlan's mind turned to the broader implications of their actions. "Think this'll really change things?" he asked, his voice tinged with curiosity and hope. "I think it already has," Tamsin replied. "We've shown that even the most destructive tools can be reimagined. It's a message that'll resonate." "And if it doesn't," Jax said with a grin, "we'll just have to make it resonate." Etta chuckled. "One artifact at a time." Quinlan gazed into his drink, the amber liquid swirling like the thoughts in his head. They'd taken a dangerous gamble and won, but he knew the universe had a way of evening the odds. Still, they'd made a difference, a small one perhaps, but a difference all the same. "To whatever comes next," he said, lifting his glass once more. "May it be slightly less life-threatening." The crew echoed his toast, their voices mingling with the tavern's din. They'd faced danger and come out the other side, a little more battered but undeniably stronger. Whatever the future held, they were ready. "Onward," Quinlan said softly, a smile playing at the corners of his lips. "To new adventures." As they sat in the tavern, the weight of their recent experiences began to lift, replaced by a sense of anticipation for what lay ahead. They were a crew forged in chaos and tempered by resilience, and they wouldn't have it any other way. The Star Shoveler, their trusty junk heap of a ship, awaited their return, ready to carry them to the next chapter of their story. And as they prepared to face whatever challenges the universe decided to throw their way, one thing was certain. They'd do it together, with sarcasm, grit, and a healthy dose of irreverence. In the end, that was all they needed.